This week, we've got UFC Baku taking place in Azerbaijan, and it's a pretty tricky UFC card. But the good news is we're coming in red hot. In the last two UFC cards, we're hitting 45% ROI. So let's keep this going. Looking at the prelims, it's the first four cards here that where the money is going to be made. Unlike most UFC cards, where you really want to just avoid the early fights, generally speaking, uh, the first four fights here are pretty good to bet on. Starting off with Hamdi Abdelwahab fighting Muhammad Usman. There's no need to go into crazy details on both of these fighters. All you need to know, and or you probably do know already, um, about Muhammad Usman. He's obviously Kamaru Usman's brother. Nothing great, nothing special. He is very tough. Usually goes to decisions in his fights, which is good for us. Fighting Hamdi Abdelwahab, I think he's an Olympic wrestler, 10th place, not like a gold medalist. And yeah, again, nothing spectacular. No scary submission game. No crazy knockout power either for heavyweights. So for this card, for this fight rather, it's not worth. I mean, you could make a very good case for picking Abdel Wahab, but you know it's his first. It's his first like real test, right? So why bother? The better play here would be to pick the over 1.5. I'm very confident in that this will be a slow and boring fight to the decision, but we don't need to go and pick the decision. We can just go over 1.5 as a parlay centerpiece. And yeah, that's a dime right off the bat. Next, we have Tagir Ulanbekov fighting Azat Maxim. And this, long story short, this one here, Tagir should win. Ulanbekov is a superior grappler fighting out of Dagestan, Khabib and everything. So there is no reason for him not to just dominate Azat Maxim in this fight. Maxim is, the record is 15-1, but a lot of his wins do come over questionable opponents, and I don't think he's at that level. And yeah, I think Ulanbekov wins this pretty heavily. He is, minus, I think, minus 400 or something, 450, but he's never finished anybody by knockout or technical knockout. So if you do a submission versus decision combination, or like a double play, you can lower the odds a bit to minus 350, or you can just keep it at money line, right? It's not that big of a difference after all in a parlay. You can also look at the over for this fight, although I'm not as confident because he could get an early submission. I'm not sure. It's unlikely. So yeah, but the better play here would definitely be the Ulanbekov money line or submission/decision. That is a dime again. Awesome. Next, we have Irina Alekseeva versus Claudia Sagula. And I think I'm kind of getting the hang of low-level women UFC or MMA fights in general. It just comes down to which woman actually wants to fight, which woman is tougher and is willing to pressure and just throw volume, because in those cases, they usually do win, by decision based on points, or the other woman just wilts under the pressure and they get a finish. And I think this is a case for Irina Alekseeva, aka the Russian Ronda. I don't think she's anything, particularly good. I don't think she's that great. But Claudia Sagula, she's a pretty face. Likes to do a little bit of, long range striking. But when she faces adversity, when she gets taken down, it is game over usually. She could improve though. We're not sure, right? She's only 26 years old, but at this point, it's her only method to win, her only path of victory is to avoid Alekseeva, dance around her, not get taken down a single time, and outpoint, which is very unlikely. So yeah, based on what D ratings and topology is saying, I do agree. I do think that Alekseeva will win. How and when, no idea. This could be a finish. This could be a submission. This could be a decision. It's not worth it. This one is not a typical over 1.5 for women. So we're going Alekseeva money line as another good parlay piece. Rounding off my four favorite fights of the card is my favorite fight of the card, Melissa Mullins fighting Daria Zeleknyova or Zeleknyokova. Yeah, this is a mismatch, I think. Again, low-level women's MMA. Melissa Mullins is the best out of the four women fighting in this card. She actually beat both of the women in the previous fight handily at that. And Daria Zeleknyokova is, she's like a slightly better version of Claudia Sagula, honestly. I don't think Melissa Mullins has any problems. Just, she's a tank. She is very aggressive. She throws. She's she's just stronger. She's just better. And at low level, you don't need to be a crazy jujitsu artist. You don't need to have pinpoint precision accuracy. You don't need to have, counter punching. You just need to go forward and punch and just be tough. And that's Melissa Mullins in a nutshell. So Melissa Mullins should win this really, really easily. I don't see Jeleknyokova winning, beating Melissa Mullins at all. Again, I don't know how she's going to win, right? This could be a finish. This could be a decision. It's not worth the round bet, but for minus 250, that is a dime. Like, this is really good for minus 250. It won't get many better than that, right? So that's a very, very good parlay piece. Yeah, first 4 fights, very, very good. Might be boring, right? People might overlook these fights and go for the more interesting, right? More hype, right? You got bigger names like Curtis Blades and Jamal Hill, but those fights are hard, man. These 4 are good. Take my word for it. These are the ones you want to be making the money off of. Next one, we have Ismail Nadia fighting Jung Young Park. And like, they're both not that good. Park is slightly better. I think Park is very tanky, as per his nickname, Iron Turtle. But he's actually not that good. It's just that this card probably doesn't have that many, well-known or great fighters, so that if you start fixating on, one fight and one guy, you start to think that he's better and better than he actually is. Park is 34, 35 years old. And people kind of make him sound like he's like a crazy pressure, wrestler. Not really, not really. The only time he really truly wrestled was against John Phillips, some guy who like literally has 0 wrestling and lost to Himaev in like 50 seconds. But yeah, Nadiev is also not that great, but he has a path to victory. He's longer, leaner, better striking. Park is not very good at striking. He usually, fights and tanks until the other guy tires out. Then he gets them on the ground and chokes them out or something, or wins a boring decision. So I think if I had to predict, I think it's more likely Park will win. But I don't see this as a grand slam, like a home run slam easy. Nadiev has a lot of paths to win. If Park does win, again, I'm not sure how he wins. The over is not bad. If you really want to touch this fight, I'd probably go with the over. Nadiev is very passive, and Park is pretty passive as well. So they're both very passive fighters. So the over 1.5 is pretty good as a parlay piece. Park money line at minus 188 is not bad for like a solo bet if you do truly believe in Park. Next, we have Song Kyung Ho fighting against Oban Elliott. And the odds are pretty crazy. It's like minus 450 or 500. But like, these are the fights where you really don't want to bet. You really don't want to bet because we don't really know too much about Ko yet. He's, debuting in UFC. And what we do know from Oban Elliott is that, he's good, but how good, right? And I think this is a test for both of them. If it wasn't, they wouldn't have made this match, right? A lot of people out there are thinking, why are they matching up Sung Kyung Ko with Oban Elliott? Obviously, they're not matched. Both of their opponents got replaced from 2 cards before. But the fact that this fight is even happening suggests that they're pretty much at the same level, right? They're similar levels, and I can see Ko knocking out Oban Elliott. Oban Elliott has been hurt on the feet before. Ko is known as a finisher, so laying that price on Oban Elliott is pretty risky. The more you think about it, the riskier it is. Again, it's because this card doesn't have too many locks, right? So you might be tempted to lock Elliott just for the sake of that, but that's not a good thing to do when it comes to betting in the UFC. My prediction is still going to be Elliott probably by decision because that's usually how he wins, but I don't think minus 450 or minus 500, whatever it is right now, is as good as a parlay centerpiece as like the first fight going over 1.5 rounds between Hamdi and Usman. That's also minus 450, but I like that way more than hoping Elliott wins a decision. So that's my take. And then we move on to the main card, and the main card is pretty brutal. It really is. Starting off with Muhammad Naimov fighting Bogdan Grad. I know Naimov is the favorite. He's like Russian. They're fighting Azerbaijan, all that stuff. But that's no reason just to pick someone, right? Bogdan Grad clearly has a path to victory. Bogdan Grad is, I think, a better striker than Naimov. And like, he's not bad. Bogdan Grad is not bad. They're similar in age. They're similar in reach. They're similar. They're very similar. Naimov is not that much better than Bogdan Grad for you to go minus 290 as a parlay piece on Naimov. Um, I know I know most people do think that he's gonna win, and I get it. If I had to pick, right again, if I had to pick someone, I would pick Naimov to win by decision. But it's not a confident pick. It's not a confident pick, and it's much better put as like a small parlay if you really want to, right? Just kind of have that validation of this favorite Naimov is going to win for sure, right? You can of course put him in a smaller parlay, but nothing big, right? Don't expect this to be a walkover. So yeah, personally, I'm not touching this one. Next, we have Nazim Sadikov fighting Nicholas Mata. And this is kind of similar. It really is. I know Sadikov's a bigger favorite, at minus 450 now, I think, or something. Mata is at plus 300. But Mata is very powerful as a striker, and he's won like back-to-back fights as plus underdog, right? One of them was plus 300, just like this. So, so it's risky. It's a risky minus 400 parlay piece on Nazem Kadyrov. Is he really our parlay centerpiece for this card? Or is it better just to take our minus 450 for the first fight going over 1.5 rounds, which it most likely will? That's the way I look at it. And I don't feel super confident in Nazem Sadikov to win. If I had a pick, absolutely. I do think he's more likely to win. But I'm not super confident. And if I were to put him in parlay, which I probably will, I probably will just kind of, again, for that satisfaction, the validation, but it's going to be a small one. It won't be on any of the big parlays so that it won't hurt our, ROI. We'll still make money either way. Whether he wins or loses, it doesn't matter. And that's the best place to put these fights. Next, we have a fight that I completely don't want to talk about or pass. Taufik Musayev, which is like a 35-year-old guy fought in different promotions, was a champion there or something, fighting Mektebek Orabai. One thing I do know about this fight is I watched his Orabai's last fight versus Rebecki, and like his eye was like messed up, but he was tank, like he took damage and he was okay, and he dished them back out in the third round. So Orabai is tough. If there's anything we know about Orabai is that he's very, very tough, which might be enough for us to lean for this fight to go over 1.5 if you want. In terms of betting, who's gonna win, whatnot, I do think Orabai is more likely to win, but I just don't even want to care about this fight because, in my opinion, it is a toss-up. As of now, it could be, it could be a complete one-way stomp by Orabai over Musayev, but you have to give Musayev credit. He does have a few knockouts under his resume, and he is fighting at home, right, Azerbaijan. So I think over 1.5 is not bad. It's not great there's by any means this is not a must include in all the parlays, but at minus 250 you could include it in a few small parlays. That's all I'm saying. All right, that's a pass for me. Next, we move on to Curtis Blades versus Rizvan Kuniev. When I first saw this fight, I was like, oh my god, Curtis Blades. Oh yes, minus 250. Oh yes, right, insta lock. But that's just because I was a fan of Curtis Blades when he was young. When he first came into the UFC, he was a pressure wrestler, to say the least. He was just mauling people, right? If you to compare him to like someone be like Therese Finney from a different weight class, of course, but the way that Finney is in love with wrestling, that was Curtis Blades. And that made it very hard for him to lose fights because he's attempting 5 takedowns a round. And when he does get a takedown, that round's done because you're not getting him off of you because he's huge and he's a really good wrestler. But I think as he got older, right, he starts to wrestle less. And I think that could be because, wrestling is fucking tiring, right? And it's easier to just go for that one punch knockout. It's easier to like trade jabs and like, hooks than it is to just constantly grind and wrestle. And I think I've seen that in Curtis Blades. He's fallen in love more and more with just trading. But even then, I feel like Curtis Blades' stand-up punching is better than Rizvan Kuniev. Curtis Blades only gets knocked out by like godlike power, right? We're talking like Francis Ngannou or Tom Aspinall or Sasha Pavlovich. Rizvan Kuniev is not those guys. At least I don't think he is. But there's an uncertainty to it, right? I mean, he's relatively unknown. The fact that they're giving him this fight to Blades is a question mark. Like, what the fuck? And why is Blades only minus 250? He should be minus 450 at the very least. So a lot of question marks I started to think about, and I feel less confident, which is, like if you're just looking at this from on paper, Blades is better at every single aspect. It's a complete, like, it's completely in Blade's favor to win this fight. It would be very hard for him to lose this fight, but the intangibles, right? Age, Blade's mentality, his fight IQ, like where's his head at? Is he gonna wrestle? Or is he gonna stand there and punch? If he does punch, is he gonna be smart and pick his shots? Or does he charge in and get caught by Rizwan? So all of those question marks do kind of thwart my enthusiasm for this Curtis Blades fight. I'm still picking Blades. How can you not, right? Anybody who just confidently picks Kuniev is out of their mind, unless they're banking this purely on like circumstantial evidence, or whatnot, and not based on actual fighting, on knowledge and understanding. But in terms of betting the confidence, again, Curtis Blades has never submitted anybody in his entire life, I think. So, rather than paying the money line, you could also do a KO/decision double play at -225. But as a parlay piece, I don't think it's a lock anymore. It's not a dime anymore for us. And I would only include it in smaller parlays now, just because of the uncertainty. If Curtis Blades comes here and pulls a vintage Curtis Blades performance, then yeah, it's supposed to happen. But we're just kind of defending against that what if, right, of that unknown uncertainty rather, of who's this Rizvan Kuniev guy, right? Is he on steroids? I don't know. Who knows? So that's best to not put too much on this. Next, we have Rafael Fiziev fighting Ignacio Bahamondes. Fiziev is a +100 favorite, which means that he's fighting at home, and his grinding takedown, wrestling style is obviously not good for Bahamondes, who's a lean, tall. Right, just look at the pictures, man. Right, if you know anything about those two guys, you know that this is a terrible matchup for Bahamondes. Bahamondes is younger. He's got obviously better reach, better striking, but he's got to finish Fiziev. I think if he wants to win, he's got to really have a amazing career-defining performance, right? Which could happen, right? If you remember, Justin Gaethje against Tony Ferguson. Before that, Gaethje was just known as like a reckless puncher, right? But then after that Tony Ferguson fight, Joe Rogan was saying how Gaethje is now, picking his shots, right? He's becoming, I think so. But Bahamondes needs to become a much, this needs to be a career-defining fight for Bahamondes if he wants to outpoint Fiziev, or he has a finish Fiziev, but it's pretty hard to finish Fiziev. So if he doesn't finish, I think Rafael Fiziev is going to just outgrind and outmuscle his way to a decision victory. At +100, it is a pretty good, it's like a coin flip, but I think it's favored, right? It's like a 55% coin flip. So, a small bet on that would be good. The over 1.5 round, I think, is also very good. I don't think Bahamondes will finish Fiziev in the first 1.5 rounds. And I don't think Fiziev is going to finish Bahamondes either. So I think that -310 is a good one. Final main event is Jamal Hill fighting Khalil Roundtree. And we have Jamal Hill, who in his career has been pretty overrated, right? He won the light heavyweight title, beating a 42-year-old Glover Teixeira, right? And he's, the people that I think he got kind of lucky in his championship run, and then after that he's just been knocked out left and right. He's got an Achilles injuries. These type of injuries are brutal for fighters. We can no longer think of Jamal Hill pre-injury anymore when we're trying to anticipate his upcoming matches. But speaking of that, Roundtree took a world of damage from Pereira. People see that as a positive. Oh, he survived 4 rounds with Pereira. He was doing pretty good in rounds 1 and 2. But when you take sustained damage like that in rounds 3 and 4, sustained damage is like worse than like an instant knockout, in my opinion, right? Fighters who took sustained, just like brutal onslaught of damage over like 10 minutes. Like think of Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier. Hooker was never the same after that fight, right? He is never Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje, right? Rory McDonald fighting Rory McDonald was never the same after Robbie Lawler. So I don't know if Khalil Roundtree is going to be the same after that Pereira fight. So a lot of unknowns. I don't feel confident picking either of these guys, honestly. If I had to pick, probably Roundtree, but I don't want to because, that's just picking a favorite based on just super. You could pick it yourself. I'm not going to give you any advice because I don't have any confidence in either of those two guys. I do think that this fight won't go to the decisions. I don't think it's going to go all 5 rounds. So under 4.5 is good, but it's not great because you never know, man. What if they just both want to just stand there and jab, right? So overall for this card, Yeah, it's a lot of passes, as you can see. For the betting standpoint, for the prelims, I do really like the first four fights. Those are the ones I would bet on. The first one will be a round, and then three money lines after that. And then for the main card, just Blades KO decision. I think I will still do it just because it's on paper, it's so good, right? And then Faziev over 1.5 is something I could do as well. But I'm not too big on those two. I really love the first four fights. To maintain our 45% or higher ROI, that's what we're gonna do. See you next video.